Okay. So, I'm going to put this on. Before we all disappeared and went to red at home or quarantine for us, hang on. Hang on. I'm tired of yelling through a mask, and I'm way up here away from you guys, so I'm going to face shield it for a minute, except it's kind of dirty. Okay. Before we were gone, we had been working with decomposers, and we learned that decomposers are the things in the environment that feed off of dead and decaying things, right? Yeah. What is the type of decomposer that we learned about? Parker, what's one type of decomposer that we learned about? Worm. Okay. We did talk briefly about a worm. We're going to talk a little bit more about worms today. Zeke, what else did we talk about? Mold. You guys spent the entire time we were at home watching mold grow. Well, some of you watched mold grow. Some of you just watched a plain piece of bread for a long time that did nothing. But you at least got to see videos and pictures of other people with mold, Miss Fab with mold. The bread that I left in the closet, apparently dark is really a big thing because, yeah, that bread really went nutso on me, more so than the one that I just left on my countertop. And some of you had some really grody things. Josie ended up with some really nasty stuff in my class. Zeke's kiwi turned into like mushy, nasty water. It looked really gross.
Can I share really quick?
Yeah, Josie still got hers. She did not get rid of it yet. Got it great?
Yeah. I don't know if you can see it much because of the reflection of my computer. Let me go turn on my light. Give me 2 seconds.
Hold it up again. I just pinned you to the screen. But anyway, while she's grabbing that. Ooh. Awesome, Josie. Very cool.
It's got mold growing onto the bag, like it's stuck to the bag.
Oh, the grape.
It's so gross.
Attaching. Okay. And what was out in the forest? What is the type of decomposer that we see growing out in the forest that like attaches to logs and leaves and things like that? Sam, what did we see out there? Mushrooms. Okay. And so, are the mushroom roots and the mold roots, are those similar to plant roots?
No.
No. Everybody in here is shaking their head. Kaylee, Floyd. Hi. What do you remember about the decomposer roots? How are they different?
I think they're different because I don't know how to explain this.
I put you on the spot, didn't I?
I'm kind of thinking how to explain this. It's hard.
All right. Zeke, help her out.
They're different because the plants, stem and flowers or blooms, like eat sunlight and take in air and stuff. And the mushrooms, they don't sprout very as often, very often, and their roots and the plant isn't yet.
So what you said, because I know you guys probably can't hear him very well, and somebody virtual needs to mute because I'm hearing a lot of scratchily noises. But what Zeke reminded us is that plants get all of their nutrition from the sun, from the air. They use their leaves and their blooms for that. And they do get a little bit of nutrition from the soil, but primarily we learned that the plants grow from the air that they bring in and the sunlight and the water. So that's where they get theirs. But the decomposers, their roots actually are eating the dead things, where plant roots don't actually eat things. They suck in and absorb things from the soil. But the decomposer roots are actually eating the dead things, which is causing those things to break down. So that's why we don't see just leaves stacked as high as trees out in the forest, because they eventually decompose and get eaten by mushrooms and mold. And I know several of you pointed out leaves that you found outside, either at recess on the playground or at your home, that had the little white roots starting to grow on them, looking kind of crazy. Josie, I see your hand raised. What do you remember about decomposers?
Okay, so it's not really about that, but I have something to say. So my bread, I got so much bread. I got 3 whole pieces of bread cut all in half, and then none of them molded, not one bit. And
Really?
yeah, they 3 things that are different. They were Dave's Killer Bread, which was like really had it's like wheat bread with a bunch of seeds on it, so that might have done something. I'm pretty sure this wouldn't, but they were all heels. And then also the main thing is that they were in the freezer. They were going to be used for French toast. So they're in the freezer. So none of it like I've had it for weeks and then none of it molded, not one bit. So
Okay. So one thing that I know is that freezer. So I think some of us noticed that put things in a cold place that it probably didn't get moldy. And we know that when we go to the grocery store that there are a lot of foods that we have to put in the refrigerator when we get home as soon as possible, or the freezer. And that's because cold keeps things fresh for longer. Lower temperatures, mold can't grow in lower temperatures. It likes a nice warm place. So if some of you had maybe sat a piece of bread like on a heater, if we'd have been in the classroom, the heaters that I have on the wall in the classroom, like I usually would sit something on the heater and it usually gets pretty funky. I can't sit anything on the vents at home because the vents are on my floor and my cats would have got it. So I couldn't put anything directly on a heater at home to show you guys. But if we'd have done it in the classroom, you would have seen that the bread on the heater grew mold quite fantastically because mold really likes heat. It's like an optimal condition for it to grow. The other thing some of you guys noticed if you used salt is that your salty things didn't ever seem to get moldy either. My salty bread never got moldy, and in fact it stayed very soft and fresh to the touch. It never even got hard or dried out.
Sugar bread. My sugar bread didn't get moldy.
Right. And the sugar, I thought the sugar would cause mold because if I think about when I put sugar on strawberries, they get moldy really fast. But it turns out that salt for sure is a preservative. It seemed like sugar almost was too, though, because my sugar grape took longer to get moldy than my nothing grape. Sean, what did you notice?
So I have like 3 pieces. My grandpa did one that he wanted to try out with yeast and water.
Yeast and water, all right, on a piece of bread.
But it didn't turn out.
Didn't turn out?
It looked like peanut butter.
Ew, it looked like peanut butter. Except knowing that it's bread and that I like peanut butter, but if I knew it was a piece of bread, like, yeah. Okay. Lily, what did you notice?
My perfume bread never molded.
Lily put perfume on one of her breads and it never molded. I was like very interested to see what would happen, and that's surprising to me but do you know what is in perfume? One of the main ingredients in almost every perfume that helps it dry quickly on your skin, so you're not, because if you just spray water on yourself, like you have water droplets on yourself for a while. But one of the main ingredients in pretty much every fragrance, like perfume or anything like that, is alcohol, like the kind of rubbing alcohol that you would put like on like wounds or sores or something, because it dries things out. And it's a cleaning agent, like it has like an antiseptic quality, which is like a medicine quality, so it cleans things. So because it has that alcohol in it, I'm guessing it's kind of like putting Germ-X on it in a way. So it kills that alcohol that's in the perfume, would kill all of the germs and bacteria and the mold that was growing. It would make it a hostile environment so that the mold couldn't grow there. So now that I'm thinking about it, that makes sense, knowing that alcohol is one of the main ingredients in pretty much any perfume, because that helps it, like I said. So if you spray perfume on yourself, it dries to your skin. It doesn't get you like all soggy and wet. Zeke, what did you notice?
I had a plain kiwi and a sugar kiwi.
I had a root turkey.
My plain kiwi, it got like cherry and blue and white. There was like blue spots and then white borders around it, and then all around the edge, and then there was like cherry in the middle.
Zeke had a kiwi, and if you didn't get to see it, it was pretty fantastic and gross.
Yeah.
It was very furry, and it was blue, and what'd you say, yellow and white?
No, wait. So the plain one was blue and white and furry. But then the sugar one, it was just looking normal. Why the other one was moldy? But one night, it got all yellow and white. But it didn't grow fur, so the sugar like stopped it from growing fur. So but
Right.
it had different mold. I feel like because it was yellow instead of
Okay.
blue on
So
the sugar.
Zeke noticed like both of his kiwis grew a lot of mold, but they grew different color mold. So he observed that it was probably different types of mold that were growing based on the different things that he did to his kiwi. And yes, Josie, Lily, I think did. Who did hand sanitizer?
I did.
No, Riley did.
I did.
Zeke did.
I did.
Yeah, okay, Jason did. Did anybody's hand sanitizer bread grow any mold? No. I don't think so. I think anything that had alcohol as an ingredient, which Germex also has alcohol in it, and that's what kills the germs, it would have killed the moldy bacteria that helps it grow. There was another comment. Okay. Yes, Maggie, if you still have yours, you can show it. Avery, what did you notice, babe?
So I chose soap and I put it in the middle of my plate, and then so like a few days like before we were about to take a picture and turn it in, what happened? My sister knocked it over, and I noticed on the bottom there was like a bunch of mold, except for like on the top there was like none.
But on the underneath side where it wasn't getting any light or anything, where the stuff was, it was like really gross.
Yeah, like in the top it was clear.
Interesting, but the bottom of it on the plate was the moldy side. That's super interesting, Avery. Did anybody else have that? That the bottom side that wasn't face up was the moldy side?
I have something to add.
Yeah, that's on my kiwis.
Yeah. Parker, what did you notice?
I put my bread on a baking pan. And there's nothing on it.
Uh-huh.
And how she said she got stuff on the bottom.
Uh-huh.
Maybe a baking pan to put bags on it and not there enough. You know what I mean?
Okay. So Parker said that he had his bread on like a baking sheet. And so he's thinking maybe like the sun was reflecting off of the baking sheet somehow, like affecting the bread on the baking sheet. Interesting. Maggie, you said you were going to show us some bread?
Yeah. I have like these little white things on there. I don't know if you can see it, but there's like really small.
Oh, yeah, I do see a little bit on there.
Yeah, and that's all I have.
All right. Yeah, so if you had just like regular white loaves of bread, like they take a long time to mold because they naturally have, when they bake them, they put a lot of preservatives in them so that they last longer. Rosie, yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I was wondering if it would matter. Like Avery said that she put hers on a plate. Mine is in like a popcorn bowl. It's like kind of flat but mostly round. And I just put all my bags around it. I wonder if that would matter. Like the different shapes of the bowl.
So the shape that it was sitting in, would that matter? How could we test that?
I guess that we could have a bowl and a plate and put one piece in it and put one piece on the plate, and then I'm guessing that the one on the plate would mold quicker because, like Avery said, on the bottom it wouldn't get as much light, like as if you can see the bottom of my bread a little bit from just looking at it.
Okay. And then if we were going to compare like the shape that the bread was sitting in, we would want to make sure that we did the exact same thing to the bread. So either put the same amount of salt on both pieces or put nothing on both pieces and make sure we're comparing the same thing. Because if we did different things to the bread, then how would we know what caused it? Was it the shape, or was it salt versus sugar, or was it nothing versus sanitizer? So you would want to make sure that you did nothing to either piece of bread and then just put them in different places and see if the shape mattered. What if I folded a piece of bread? Would folding it make any difference? I wonder. But again, you would have to take a regular flat piece of bread and a folded piece of bread and then just wait and see which one happened first without doing anything to them. So, but those are different experiments that you are welcome to try at home on your own. For today, If you are virtual, you have this article on Seesaw you can follow along, or you can just be a good listener. If you're in class, you have it in front of you, follow along. Okay, and this is kind of just a review, but it does bring up a couple new things about decomposers that we haven't talked about yet. Hang on. When you have an empty bottle, do you recycle it so the plastic or glass can be used again? Nature has its own recycling system, a group of organisms called decomposers. Decomposers, we know already, feed on dead things, dead plant materials such as leaves and wood, animal carcasses, which are bodies, and feces, which is poop. They perform a valuable service as Earth's cleanup crew. Without decomposers, dead leaves, dead insects, and dead animals would pile up everywhere. Imagine what the world would look like, okay? So we've talked about that before. We had the Mystery Science video that showed all the leaves piled up in the forest, okay? More importantly, decomposers make vital nutrients available to an ecosystem's primary producers, usually plants and algae. So we learned about that producers are the plants, and they're called producers because they produce their own energy. You guys remember this? How did the plants produce their own energy? Where do they get their energy from? Parker, where do they get their energy from? The sun, right? So producers are the only things that get their energy directly from the sun and use that energy to make their own food. Producers, the plants, okay? All right. So it says that decomposers are making nutrients available to the producers, okay? And we know that plants get nutrients from the soil a little bit. So let's learn more about this. It says decomposers break apart complex organic materials into more elementary substances. So that means really complex things, and it breaks them down into simple things, okay? Water and carbon dioxide, plus simple compounds like nitrogen, phosphorus, and calcium. All of these are things that plants need to grow. Some decomposers are specialized and break down only a certain kind of dead organism. Other are general and feed on lots of different materials. Thanks to decomposers, nutrients get added back to the soil or water so the producers can use them to grow and reproduce. Okay. Most decomposers are microscopic organisms, including protozoa and bacteria. These are really tiny things like little germs and things that we can't see. Other decomposers are big enough to see without a microscope. They include fungi, along with organisms sometimes called detritivores, which include earthworms, termites, and millipedes. So Parker mentioned a second ago that Parker mentioned that worms are a decomposer, and they are. So I want to pause here for a second and talk about how worms are helping the soil. And millipedes are too. Okay, so if you think about this, worms like to live in plants or underneath in the dirt, underneath plants and gardens, okay? If you ever are in the yard helping your parents with flowers or bushes or anything like that in a little garden area or a flower bed, in the spring or summer, you are almost always going to find worms when you start digging in that dirt, because the worms like to feed off of the dead leaves on the plants. And then when worms poop, I get it, it's gross to say, but worms poop. And when worms poop, they are putting all of those nutrients back into the soil. Their poop has that stuff it says plants need. Nitrogen, phosphorus, calcium, all of those minerals are in worm poop. So when the worms poop back in the ground, then the plants and the producers suck that up as the nutrients in the soil.
And you know how we smell
And Parker says, you know how we smell flowers? And flowers smell good. But you wouldn't think that because flowers eat worm poop.
Yeah.
They don't eat it, right?
So
the plants don't eat,
wait,
but they absorb it.
So I
Not
help
the
worm, like,
So don't picture this. Do not picture like a little piece of poop going into the plant, right? The poop breaks down in the soil and becomes calcium, nitrogen, phosphorus, and those are the nutrients. Just like your body turns a piece of bread into nutrients, and then you poop too. Like your body uses the things in the food, the plants are using the things from the poop, from the worm poop. So if the decomposers did not release these nutrients back into the soil, would the producers have the nutrients they needed? No. So the plants would not be as healthy without worms or decomposers breaking things down and putting it back into the soil. So if you think about it, so thinking about Zeke's kiwi, as it was breaking down, Zeke noticed that what would normally be a slice of kiwi that you would have to chew it, right? It would be not chewy, but there's some substance to it, right? But as it was molding, it was getting like more soft and liquidy, right? And it was turning into gooky juice. And so that's what happens with mold and mushrooms in the forest. When they eat leaves, when they eat dead animals, when they eat all of the things that they're eating, it turns it into something else. So it doesn't look like a kiwi anymore. It like dissolves into this gooey liquid, and that gooey liquid would absorb into the soil and be able to be used again by the plants as they grow. Does that kind of make sense to everybody? So that's why it says that they are nature's recycling system, because they take the dead yucky stuff and they turn it into nutrients that can be reused by the producers again. And then when the producers lose their leaves, the process starts all over again. So it's like a cycle, okay? It's constantly going. Zeke.
It's sort of awesome, but I have a question. Why is Milla like 1,000 instead of like millennium and millipedes? Millipedes have 1,000.
I don't know. I have no idea. Milla should mean million. Okay. All right, carrying on. I don't know. We'll have to, that could be a question for the Wonder Wall. Okay, carrying on. Fungi are important decomposers, especially in forests. Some kinds of fungi, such as mushrooms, look like plants. But here's a big difference. Fungi do not contain chlorophyll, which is the pigment that green plants use to make their own food with sunlight. So mushrooms cannot make their own food with the sunlight. They have to have a host organism. They have to have something that they're feeding off of, okay? Instead, fungi get all their nutrients from dead materials that they break down with special enzymes, okay? The next time you see a forest floor carpeted with dead leaves or a dead bird lying under a bush, take a moment to appreciate decomposers for the way they keep nutrients flowing through an ecosystem. We're learning science right now, Sophie, okay? All right, so on the back, on your next page for you guys, and on the back, we're just gonna go over this together, okay? Decomposers worksheet. Earthworms are a decomposer, which is true about earthworms' role in the environment. Circle all that are true. That's a hint that there's more than one of these. Lily, which ones do you think are true?
I think I know one of them. If they release nutrients, plants need to grow.
Okay, Lily says C, they release nutrients plants need to grow. That is correct. There is one more. Jason, what do you think? A, they break down decaying plant material. Correct. Do worms eat the plant's roots? No, they do not. Okay. All right. Why don't they eat a plant's roots? The roots are the roots dead and dying? Avery, why would the worms not eat the plant roots?
Because it'll kill all the plants.
It would kill the plant, and the roots are the healthy part that's bringing in the nutrients, right, Zeke?
The roots are still alive. They're not dead.
The roots are still alive. They're not dead. And the worms only want to eat dead, gross stuff. Good. Right. And if they did, for some reason, eat the root, then they would kill the whole plant, which would then be more food for them. Okay. All right. Number 2, true or false? Worms are the only kind of decomposer. False. What other kinds of decomposers did we learn about? Fungi, termites, millipedes, mushrooms, mold. Okay. All right. Number 3, are worms important?
Yes.
What do you guys think? Are worms important?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thumbs up, thumbs down.
No. Yeah.
It's a thumbs up. They are. What happens to plants if they don't have any worms in their soil? Parker, what would happen to the plants without worms? They wouldn't be able to live. Why not? Okay. They wouldn't have the nutrients that they need getting put back into the soil. Jason?
I think no, actually. There's still millipedes, the other ones.
Okay. It could be. Well, if there were other decomposers, then they would be okay.
Yeah.
Right. But they do need to have some kind of decomposer nearby to help them. Now, you think, well, what about the plants that are in my house? I'm sure some of your families have plants in your house, potted plants. And I'm guessing that you don't have worms living in those potted plants.
No.
Never.
No.
Never. Exactly. But the soil that your parents put in that potted plant has nutrients in it. When you buy potting soil from the store, it has nutrients already built into it. Like a lot of times you see like the little white dots in it. But if you think about when you go outside, you don't see those little white pellet dots on regular soil or dirt. No, those little white pellet dots release the nutrients into the soil as it gets wet. And that's what feeds the plants, because you don't have worms in potted plants in your house. At least you probably shouldn't, because what if they get out and crawl all over your house?
And we wouldn't eat worms because we have those artificial nutrients.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So Zeke says, well, I don't need worms in my soil, but if I don't have worms in the soil, then you do need some sort of fertilizer or something on your soil to help the plants grow and get the nutrients they need. Okay. It says, what happens if you are missing one part of the food cycle in an ecosystem? So what if we didn't have any producers? The producers are the plants. What would happen without producers? Josie?
Everything would crash. Because if we didn't have something, why do we have decomposers in our ecosystem? Why? We need them, that's why. Because if one thing was wrong with it, you can't just try and make a chocolate chip cookie with no chocolate chips. Right?
I got a good one.
I get where you're going with this, Josie. Kaylee, what are your thoughts? I saw your hand raised.
It's kind of like if we didn't have like one thing of the cycle, it would just like stop. It wouldn't work. Kind of like what Josie said. Like if you had no like chocolate chips and
I got
chocolate chip cookie, like you need to keep the cycle going. You can't just let it like stop without something. It can't miss anything.
So it's this whole cycle that we have, right? So the sun gives the energy to the producers, which are our plants. And then the plants get eaten by the animals, which are called consumers. Remember that word, consumers. We're consumers too, because we eat plants and animals. Now, some consumers eat only plants. Some consumers eat plants and other animals. But if there were no plants, would the consumers have anything to eat? And then the consumers die. And if the consumers die, do the decomposers have anything to eat? For a while they do, because they're eating the dead stuff. But then once everything's dead, is there anything left to die for them to eat? No. So like Josie and Kaylee said, it is a cycle. And if you lose one piece, then everything else will start to die because they don't have anything to eat. Just like if we lost the sun, the producers wouldn't have anything to make food with, and all of our plants would die. Not instantly. It would get really cold really fast. We would probably die because of not having enough heat before we would starve.
Yeah, no, we would like.
This has a question.
We're just trees.
Okay. Kaylee, I see your hand raised.
It's kind of like if we had like if we're all like humans, like we need to have water and food. Like if we're all like we have everything, we have a house, we have roof and everything, but we don't have like water, then we'll just like die because we need water and like food to live. Like kind of like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. So you need all of the different pieces. Just like we need water, we need food, we need shelter. Those are the basic things that we need to live. The environment needs some of everything. We need producers, we need consumers, and we need decomposers. We need all three for it to work. Okay. All right. Now, I'm going to pass out another paper to them. You guys already have it, the Web of Life study guide. We're going to go over this because tomorrow you're going to have a quizzy quiz. Okay? And so I'm going to make sure you have.
No quizzy quiz.
No.
Hang on, you guys need to stop and listen.
Nobody likes quizzes.
I'm gonna see if I can find it.
Right. Exactly.
Web of Life.
Okay. Web of Life study guide.
Because
I had to. Did you just send it out? Because I can't see it.
What? Okay.
Did you?
I did not
send it?
share it with you, so I did not share it with you yet, Sophie. Okay. Hang on. Sophie, are you going to be back tomorrow?
I think so.
Okay.
I don't.
Hang on. That's not what I wanted to do. I'm trying to find it for you, Sophie. Give me just a second. Science.
Fiona, are you still on a 10?
Sophie, if you hit refresh, you should have it. It's called Decomposers December 1st. And then go to the page that says Web of Life Study Guide. At the top, it starts with vocabulary. Okay?
Got it.
Yeah.
Do we need to fill out the study guide, or do we just like need to practice it?
You can practice with it. I'm going to go over the answers. I'm going to recommend my friends at Face-to-Face take this home and actually study it tonight. So I'm going to make sure that you guys have the correct answers. So if you want to fill it out and save it as a draft so that you have it to look back at tonight and study, you can. I would recommend that. So
Yeah.
Producer, vocabulary, producer. Those are plants, right? You want to write this down. Producers are plants. They make their own energy using the sun. Plants get energy from the sun.
Plants that get
Okay, producers are. All right, you guys are going to have to just listen, and I'm going to have to keep going, or we're not going to get done before they have to go to their next thing here in person, which means that if you don't catch it, you might have to watch the recording back later. Okay, guys? So producers are the plants. They get their energy from the sun, and they make their own energy.
found it.
Okay. Ecosystem. A community of organisms that work together. We didn't really talk about that.
A community of what?
A community of organisms that works together. So it's kind of like what we just talked about, how the producers have to have the consumers and the consumers have to have the decomposers, and they all work together. So if you think about it, either different types of ecosystems, like I could have a pond and I have algae is my producer, and I've got fish as my decomposers, and then there are other little, or fish are my consumers, I'm sorry. And then I've got probably worms and other little things like that are decomposers in there, algae eaters, those kinds of things. Or I have an ecosystem in my backyard where I've got plants and trees. I've got consumers like squirrels, rabbits. I might even have like a fox or something out there, or a deer. And then decomposers, we've got worms, we've got mushrooms. All of those are things you can find in your backyard. And if you removed one of them, then your yard might start to look a little wonky, right? Okay. So ecosystem, a group of organisms that works together, a community of organisms that works together. Consumers get their energy from eating other organisms, such as producers, plants, and animals. Consumers get their energy from eating plants and animals. Okay. And then finally, decomposer. Decomposers break down the dead or decaying plants. Or animals, yep. Dead or decaying plants or animals. All right. Now we're going to fill in the blank. Be careful on this. First one. Our energy comes from the Lily. Consumer. I can repeat consumer. Consumer. Any animal that eats plants or other animals.
Hey, this guy. If we went into like access on it, like it would be so cool if you could even imagine it. The way the trees.
Okay.
And like
All right.
green trees would make it-
Number one. Our energy comes from. Where does our energy ultimately come from? Even further back. The sun. Okay, all energy ultimately comes from the sun. What do plants get from soil? Nutrients, yeah. What do plants get from soil? They get nutrients. All right. It's been a while since we talked about this, but I'm pretty sure this blew your minds when we first learned this in the Mystery Science video. We learned that plants can breathe, and they have these little holes on the undersides of their leaves that bring in air. Stomata. Very good. Stomata. S-T-O-M-A-T-A. Stomata. And I was just watching Magic School Bus with my son the other day while we were out on break on Netflix. And there was totally an episode where they went inside a plant and it was breathing through its stomata. And that's how they got out of the plant. The school bus flew out of the stomata to leave the plant. I was like, what? We need to watch this in 5th grade. Because it was all about being inside of a plant. Maybe if we have time later this week, we can watch it because it was actually a really good episode and it had everything to do with what we were learning about right now. It was really cool. Okay. And the plant was dying because it wasn't getting enough air and it wasn't getting enough sunlight. And so they had to learn what the plant needed. It was really interesting. Okay. Number 4, without blank, leaves and other dead, rotten things would pile up everywhere. Without decomposers, yes, that's your blank on number 4, decomposers. Without the decomposers, the leaves and the other things would pile up everywhere. Okay, a lot of these questions or fill in the blanks are kind of very similar. It's saying the same thing a lot of different ways, okay? So be careful. Blank and blank are both decomposers. You can list 2 kinds of decomposers here. What are some of the things that you could list? Worms,
Fungi.
mold, fungi,
Mushrooms.
mushrooms. Okay. They are responsible for, so what are these things responsible for?
Decomposing.
Decomposing, breaking down the dead and decaying things. Okay. It says, what is, number 6, the correct flow of energy through the food chain? Okay. And let me see if I can draw that for you really quickly. Hang on.
Oh, thanks for listening, guys. I appreciate it.
Correct flow of energy through a food chain. It starts with the sun. Energy from the sun
We can't see
goes
it.
to.
Miss
I shared it with you guys. It
never
should be
mind.
shared with you guys.
I can see it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can
Okay. Goes to producers. Goes to consumers. Consumers are the animals and humans that eat other living organisms. Okay. And then from here, when the consumers die, the animals or the producers, okay, goes to decomposers. And when the decomposers release the nutrients, it goes back into the soil for the producers. Okay?
What is the E?
E for energy. It's the sunshine, but it's an E for energy. So this is how the energy is going. It starts at the sun, and then the plants use that to grow and make their own energy. Then when we eat the plants, and when the animals eat the plants, they get that energy. The decomposers get that energy from eating on the dead and decaying things. And then they release those nutrients back into the soil for the producers to continue growing. Does that make sense? So that's your number 6. Okay. On number 7, it says, what would happen if you had too many producers in an ecosystem? Can you have too many plants? No, so cross that part off. But what would happen if you had too many consumers?
We don't have enough. Oh,
Parker, what do you think?
we won't have enough food where we can practice.
Parker says they would not have enough food because if there were too many consumers, it would be imbalanced. And so the consumers would eat all of the producers, all of the plants, and then there wouldn't be any left. And the consumers, there would not be enough plants to feed all of the consumers.
Yeah, and then when all the consumers died, they didn't have any more plants. The world would go crazy because it would be the Hunger Games.
Okay, and then Zeke says it turns into Hunger Games because then if there's not enough plants, then the consumers are going to start starving, then they're going to die, and then we're not going to have the decomposers, and now everything's just out of whack. And like you guys said, you have to have each piece, and it has to be in balance. If you have too much or not enough, then your cycle gets out.
Because that's a
All
lot.
right. Yeah.
You would just eat the composers. Or, yeah, you would eat the composers. Eat the cows.
The consumers? Yeah, we would be able to eat that for a while, but if the cows don't have anything to eat, they wouldn't last for very long because cows eat grass. So if the grass all died and there were too many cows. So think about this. If you put one cow in a field, it's got enough grass to last it a lifetime probably, right? But if I put, think about this. You guys have, just to have a frame of reference, you guys know how big our playground is outside. If I put 200 cows on the playground, would they have enough to eat? All of them? No. So they would starve eventually, right? So that's when I say if you have too many consumers, that's what I'm talking about. So if I put 200 cows on the playground, there would not be enough grass for all of them, and some of them would eventually starve and die, right? Okay. All right. Next question. What would happen if you didn't have any producers in an ecosystem?
I have a question. So, put eventually everything would die off. That's what I put. Is that good for 7?
On 7 and 8, the answer is basically the same. If you have not enough, or if you don't have any, the chain breaks down, the cycle breaks down, and eventually everything dies. Yes, correct. Okay, 9, 10, 11, 12. 9. What gets eaten by consumers? Plants. Producers get eaten by consumers. 9 is producers. Okay. 10. Which thing dies and excretes waste into an ecosystem? It excretes its waste into the ecosystem. Think about which one did we talk about pooping?
Decomposers.
Decomposers. Okay. The decomposers, when they die or excrete waste into an ecosystem. So that's your decomposers. 11. Yep. 11. What releases nutrients for producers?
Energy.
Energy doesn't release.
Ecosystem.
Jason? Nope, not ecosystem.
Wait.
Kaylin?
Consumer.
Nope, the consumers aren't releasing nutrients for the producers. One of these words is getting used twice, by the way.
Decomposers.
Decomposers are releasing nutrients for the producers. And finally, the last one, 12. They die and or lose leaves for decomposers. I'm sorry, number 10 is consumers. I'm sorry, number 10 is consumers. Go back and change that. Number 10 is consumers. Consumers die and or excrete waste into an ecosystem. So, think about this. We talked about that worm poop also has nutrients for the plants. Cow poop has nutrients for the plants. That's not where chocolate milk comes from. Jiminy Christmas, Parker. Oh my goodness. I don't even know what to say. Things have gone haywire. Things are hysterical in here. Okay, 10 is consumers. So not only do we die, plants and animals die and the decomposers eat that, but we can also give nutrients back to the producers through the things that we excrete or waste. Okay. All right. And number 12, what dies or loses leaves for the decomposers to feed off of? Dies or loses leaves. Producers. Okay. Well, that's it. If you have all these answers, then you are ready for our quiz tomorrow. If you're a face-to-face kid, I highly suggest you take this and read through it a handful of times to make sure you know all of this information. If you guys filled it out online, save it as a draft so that you can go back to it and look at it tonight. Okay? All right. That's all I have for science today. So you guys are good to hang up. I would just, like I said, recommend studying tonight as much as you can. I don't know why we have Danby bells going on in the building right now today, but we do. And then, yeah. All right, guys. So you guys are good to go. I will see you at 12:35 in about an hour for writing. We'll get you guys some lunch or something. Rest a little bit. Study a little bit if you want. I'm going to turn the recording off. You guys are good to go. And then they're heading out to recess here.